Boy, there's been a lot in the world of golf. A lot. And every day that I work and we have Dan with us, I have my respect for him grows because in addition to having his own show, doing his own podcast, I Want Your Flex, okay, he is at his core, like his favorite personal recreational sport is golf, and the dude knows a ton about it. Matter of fact, for people who don't know, we're going to the U.S. Open next Thursday, right? And all of that is Dan, right? Dan just knows everybody. Hey, getting it all set up, getting it all lined up. And so immediately when I turned and looked at my phone, was it 2 days ago, right? 2 days ago when I woke up and LIV and the PGA were merging. I was like, wait, excuse me? The Hatfields and the McCoys? This is Romeo and Juliet. Instead of both perishing with suicide, they're actually getting married out in the open. That's what it felt like. And we're doing this thing, which I understand because I lived through it. And those of us who truly lived through it, like if you were, I think you had to be probably over the age of 18. But you're over the age of 18 in 2001. Your perspective on this is completely different than anybody who did not. 9/11 is, without any question, the scariest moment as an American in regards to the safety of and future of our country. We were under attack, and we went to a war on what I think anyone would deem false pretenses, but the reality was we went to war because we were pissed. And anybody who we thought was against us, we're just pissed. And we didn't necessarily get all of the right people, but we got a lot of the right people. And of course, the Saudis, for the most part, escaped any sort of execution or prosecution, right? And so when the Saudis are behind the LIV Tour, we trot out the idea of the 9/11 families, and that was the PGA's, that's the PGA sweet spot over the past year, where, hey, this is what you're saying to these families, that you don't care about them. Instead, you care about golf and about money. Here's PGA policy board member Jimmy Dunn, who is one of the architects of the merger. He said this about the LIV PGA merger and how the 9/11 families have reacted.
And let's be specific, okay, on 9/11. Every day, the first thing I think about is that. Several times during the day, I think about it. And the last thing I think about at night is that. That has not changed since that day. And I'm not alone in that. I would guarantee that every one of those family members has that same condition. It is just a reality of how unbelievably sad and awful that day was. I understand that. And I am quite certain, and I have had conversations with a lot of very knowledgeable people, that the people I'm dealing with had nothing to do with it. And if someone can find someone that unequivocally was involved with it, I'll kill him myself. We don't have to wait around.
Byron, I apologize. I spent time away from the radio and didn't listen. What are your thoughts on the merger and how it relates to the 9/11 family?
I felt that the PGA Tour used the families to strengthen their argument when really they only just cared about their bottom line and keeping the competition away from them. I do believe that there are people out there, Brandel Chambly, who I think is a great analyst. There are people that don't like his opinions. That's fine. I believe he is bothered where this money is coming from. I think that is a real deal. I believe that people are bothered that there's any connection to the Saudis with this money. I don't think that the PGA Tour had ever felt that way, and I felt that they used the 9/11 families and the families of those victims to try to dissuade people and slander the players that left because of their bottom line, not because they cared about the victims or the families.
I think that's fair. I think a little bit of this is like we do this with the start time of sporting events. We always do what about the kids? What about the kids? When no one's actually ever really cared about the kids, right? They just care about the bottom line.
Yes.
Obviously, this is a far more troubling thing in regards to the Saudis. But again, this is the excuses that we make to make more money, right? The excuses that we make to make more money. It's no different, right? Obviously, 9/11 and the effect it had on those families and on our country are gigantic and far wider reaching and more important than conference affiliation. But it's we hear the same thing with conferences. USC and UCLA, really? You're going to leave the Pac-10 to go play in the Big Ten? Dude, what about Cal? What about your rivalry with Arizona? What about these schools you compete? Oklahoma doing it, leaving Oklahoma State, your sister's school, and but we make a lot more money. That doesn't mean it's the right thing. But that's where we are in sports. And virtue was supposed to still exist. And maybe this is me having a romantic view of it. But on some level, virtue was supposed to still exist. And it just does not. Right? It absolutely does not still exist in sports. And this is the perfect example of it. And to me, that's a far greater crime, if you will, than the fact that Rory or Tiger didn't make hundreds of millions more dollars. That's just business, right? That's you had a chance to collect a big paycheck and you did not. But that's also something that we're teaching is that loyalty means nothing. Now, I truly believe that one of the reasons this happened, and Dan, you can tell me if I'm way off, I don't think golf was in especially good shape. And I think that the Saudis and LIV, I think that was, it's a money loser in that they just wanted to kind of shake up the sport if they could. And it was a good one to shake up and a good time to shake it up. And they caught it at the right moment. But I actually think this probably really helps golf, reinvigorates golf, because look, golf post Tiger is not going to be great. I'm just warning you. And how do I know this? Because I have 20 years of post Michael Jordan, and LeBron and Steph kind of resurrected it, but it still has never really been the same. And especially those 10 years after Michael Jordan first walked away, that was when it was really, really bad. So I'm just going to be completely candid. I think it helps golf, but golf was not in some sterling great place. Dan, is that fair or totally
I actually think we've been in the post-Tiger era for a while. Just because of how limited we've seen him. And I think that golf is okay. And for people to realize that it's never going to reach the heights that it did with Tiger, at least in the near future, it's understandable. He is, to talk about generational, he's more than generational, the effect that we've had. We've talked about this on the show. But I will also say this, Phil Mickelson, I think, comes out looking the best in all of this. In saying, see, I told you. The problem that the PGA Tour had, and I think part of this is obviously a lot of it's due to LIV, is they had a tough time figuring out how they were going to pay everybody with these higher purses, with these designated events, and the sponsorship maybe wasn't there. While LIV had the same troubles of their stuff didn't take off maybe as much as they thought that they were going to, and maybe the PIF wanted more of a return. So that marriage happened because the PGA Tour was forced to try to compete with LIV, and now they may have been out of their pockets. Also, Saudis didn't want to testify because some court rulings went against them. Honestly, Doug, right now, we don't know what the new PGA Tour is going to look like. We find out new stuff every single day. The reason why the PGA Tour, though, I think did this deal is because now there is no competition. LIV is likely to go away, and this solves some of their financial problems that they may have had that were brought on by the creation of LIV. It's very, very strange that not a lot of people really know what the future of golf is even going to look like. We just know that the PGA Tour will be around now with the backing of this financial partnerip.
That's fair. That is fair.
Sounds like a lot of word mumble jumble, like I'm hearing myself talk.
No,
but
honestly, it doesn't. Dan, I actually agree with you. There's a lot of unknown, and I think that Monahan came out looking a lot better when you see that he's in charge of both. But it's what he does with that power that's going to be interesting, right? Because if he's in charge of the LIV Tour and the PGA Tour, and he really wants to make it up to the guys that stayed loyal to the tour, well, then he's going to have to figure out some way to do so.
Yes.
Right? And is he going to find those players, or is he going to make the Saudis pay those guys that they made offers to? How is he going to do that? Because, like, look, there's a world where those guys are like, hey, I'm not playing. I'll do my own kind of LIV thing. And there's a couple of them that do have that power. I'm fascinated by what he does, because it does feel like a better deal for the PGA than you first felt like, well, they're just trying to hide any sort of documents and disclosures, and they're just selling out. It does feel like a really good financial deal and a power move by Monahan, where he's going to be a lot. But what does he do with that? That's my question.
I think that, the initial reaction was that, Rory McIlroy got screwed, and
totally.
That
Tiger.
Jay Monahan was Tiger as well. Jay Monahan was an absolute backstabber. Hearing Rory's comments on Wednesday, he felt like a scapegoat, sure, but it didn't seem like there was an end-all relationship with Jay Monahan, despite the tensions in the player meeting that they had on Tuesday when this was all announced. And again, this is so new. There are going to be casualties in the golf world of this, and it may be the lesser players, but the argument is the PGA Tour isn't, built on the shoulders of the lesser players as much as you want to believe that it is. It's built on the best and the stars, and now it's able to continue because you're getting couple of those guys back. It's not everyone. I didn't think it was tons of guys that, left for LIV that really moved the needle, but Cam Smith and Brooks Koepka, and it looks like that they're going to be heading back.
Okay, so I guess here's the question is there a statute of limitations on 9/11 with the Saudis? Like, well, these people aren't direct. And it's fair to say nobody had direct connections, but we can also be honest in that you can probably make 1 or 2 degrees of separation between it and find a way, right? There's the thought that this is where money and support came from, or they can act like they're Switzerland, but they're really not. Like, to you, is there a statute of limitations on, hey, we can take Saudi money now because there's been enough time between 9/11 and 2023?
It's difficult for me to say. So I would say probably no, because I just feel like if you feel that way, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years doesn't change your feelings. You either feel like you should do business or you shouldn't. And so that's where we are, approaching 22 years after the fact. So I don't think that there is, because I just think that you either accept it or you never will accept it.
What do you think there, Jace 2?
Oh, man, this is so nuanced and complicated. You know me. I don't really get into the weeds of this stuff, but I did like the theater that played out this week. I liked that very uncomfortable exchange with the Golf Channel and the PGA commissioner where I think Monahan, is that his name? Or
yes.
He was just stumbling to come up with an answer for the 9/11 families. And then, just seeing how it's played out with the players, players stepping in it, not really trained in PR. I mean, this is a very sensitive thing, and maybe less is more in this situation. I keep your mouth shut until we get through this. But I do agree that once we get through this initial fog of, everybody calling everyone a hypocrite and everyone's a jerk, and then I think after everything subsides, it seems like the sport will be healthier. I know that's kind of the lazy take, but that's mine.
No, I think so too. We'll all kind of quickly forget there's a lot of conference expansion to it. The one thing about it that's interesting is, 9/11 obviously has direct connections, not just to our country, history, and our safety, etc., but there's also look, a good portion of the number of people who died in the World Trade. It was the financial hub and headquarters, and the financial sector, where is a gigantic supporter of golf. Right? It just is. Like there are direct, it's not out of left field as much as most connections to the Saudis and to 9/11 would be more out of left field and more searching. Right? Like there's so many different financial entities that were affected and still affected to this day. So there's more of a connection. But I also think that I'm only going to disagree with Dan from this perspective, is that the numbers are just not good without Tiger involved. And maybe this is more feelings than facts. Okay. Because Dan will have more facts. It is a feeling like we're kind of searching for, is there any reason to watch on a Sunday? Right? And not liking Brooks, the guy, but appreciating how good he was or has been at times in Masters or in majors is, I guess, sort of something. But there hasn't been a guy or couple of guys or rivalry to bring us to TV sets with Tiger kind of riding off some sort into the sunset. And that's going to be really interesting, that this does provide the financial stability for several years to come, but it doesn't necessarily change the fact that golf is not as mainstream as it was. It seems to be going back to being the elitist sport it always used to be.